Does this work? Yes. So I thank you very much indeed for coming along. Just a quick housekeeping before starting. It's a slightly different panel than before in that we're missing Pierre Monnier, who from Open Edition, who unfortunately couldn't join us today. But we do have Eelco and Eileen, and I'm Rupert Gatti. So we've got three talks, all interrelated in that we're all going to be talking about the development of open infrastructure and some of the projects that have been funded recently and will be moving towards developing open infrastructures. So I was going to kick off with a little bit of a more general talk about open infrastructures and what we're trying to do, and then we'll pass over to sort of more specific examples along the way. Okay, so I'm Rupert Gatti. Just quickly, I'm a economist at Trinity College in Cambridge, but also a founder of Open Book Publishers, which is a open access monograph book publishers based in Cambridge, which started about 10 years ago. Okay, the key thing I think to start with, what I'd like to do is just think a little bit about the book industry ecosystem and thinking about bibliodiversity particularly. So what I want to do is start thinking about bibliodiversity, why it's important, what it is and why we need to protect it. And then think a little bit about the differences between OA book production and non-OA book production, and some of the go through production costs, distribution and revenue streams a little bit, and think about what the similarities and differences are between OA books and non-OA books. And then come around to, therefore, what do we mean by OA book infrastructure, what I mean by scaling small, and trying to say that what we're trying to develop here is a system to support a dynamic publishing ecosystem rather than to support any individual publisher or any individual platform. And I think that's an important distinction to make, that one's not looking for one thing to rule the world. Yeah, one really wants bibliodiversity. So how does one achieve that? And I think that's the focus that we're all taking today. And I'd like to stress that means open protocols, open data models, and open software, rather than any specific platform or any specific publisher. And the need, I think, for that to be community controlled, those open protocols and data models, rather than to be under the control of any individual organisation, be it a profit or a non-profit organisation. You don't want to have a single set of objectives ruling the definitions of an open structure. So for me, open infrastructure means that. Open protocols, open data models, and open software that can all collaborate and interrelate, rather than a specific model or a specific platform. So I just want to make that clear from the start. Okay, bibliodiversity. Okay, you're going to shut me up, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm not very good at that. Okay, bibliodiversity. Just to pull out the incredible range of publications and publishers in the monograph, the scholarly monograph world. So the REF UK research assessment exercise in the UK asks scholars to submit work that they've done over the previous 4 or 5 years. And in the last REF, which was in 2014, there were 8,500 books that were submitted as part of that assessment exercise. And I've got the breakdown there. Most of them were monographs, the standard monographs, but there were quite a lot of edited works, scholarly editions. Now, clearly there were more than that produced, but this is the number that was submitted for the REF. Amongst those was nearly 1,200 different publishers were involved in that. So it's a huge, huge tale of publishers that are all doing their own things, all doing it quite often in a specialist area, and have got real expertise and strengths in those areas. In fact, if you look at the top 10 publishers, that's CUP and OUP and publishers like this, accounted for less than 50% of all the submissions. So it's an incredibly diverse publishing environment that's going on in Europe and the UK. And also, something like 80%, just over 80% of the books were published by publishers in the UK. So it was very geographically centric. And I suspect that that's the same in most places. If you go to most countries, most of the publishers for the ref will be locally based as well. So you expand this out, there's a huge ecosystem of book publishers who are really, really important and have got real power. There's different editorial controls, different subject areas, different regional linguistics, specializations. And on top of that, it's also all this innovation that comes from that. And we're seeing that a lot in open access world. Lots of small publishers coming in with different ways of doing things, different ways of defining scholarship, different ways of defining a publication, different ways of defining areas of research and ways to looking at research. And these are all hugely important and a hugely important part of our research ecosystem. So we can't lose that. So the danger is what happens if you start having platforms and centralization. To what extent is that lost? That we get this sort of single defining platform, single defining, this is a book, and it's a book because it has the following characteristics, and if it doesn't have those characteristics, it isn't a book. These are very potentially restrictive practices that we need to be able to take a more broader look at and think, how do we support that diversity of content? Okay, so just very quickly, production costs. So one of the things I like to say is that production costs don't vary much by scale of publisher. They seem to vary quite a lot by region. So we've got various studies that have US university presses at $30,000 to $40,000 to produce a book. Eelco did a study of Dutch publishers in which it was about $5,000 to $10,000. At OBP, Open Book Publishers, where I am, over the last 3 years, it's ranged annually from sort of between £5,000 and £6,500. So clearly there's huge differences between publishers, but there's absolutely no evidence that I've seen that scale helps any. Being a big publisher doesn't make producing a single book that much cheaper. In fact, if anything, it might make it a little bit more expensive. Exactly. So being big might make it worse and more difficult, and also more difficult to really tailor the work for the individual author. So as far as sort of economics, wearing my economics hat on, that's what I am, this is a constant or even decreasing return to scale industry in which you would hope and expect to have large numbers of producers in that industry. So that's great news. What's not so great news is that distribution doesn't work the same way. And if you look at distribution, it's concentrated by a couple of big players, usually 2 or 3 large players. Sometimes there's differences between library and retail distributors, between print and ebook distributors, some sort of regional differences. But on the whole, that all breaks down. Consolidation is happening in that area. So we've got real dangers that consolidation could lead to control of the books, of the various definitions of what a book is and how books are distributed. Okay, we've got bunches of revenue models. The standard one is sales income for non-OA revenue books, but there's ebook collection, institutional support. In the OA revenue models, you know what? Sales income is still potentially important, and there's no real evidence that is going to be destroyed or is being destroyed by OA content. The other big OA revenue model is book processing charges, but I think that there's genuine concern around the place that this is not a manageable way of funding book processing, book publishing moving forward, and institutional support we're seeing. But there's a huge number of other business models around there. And so I think there's a danger of walking into the idea that there is a business model which will support publication and open access works. There's huge numbers of different business models around for open access works. At Open Book Publishers, we have 3 different important sources of income: sales, a library consortia, and book grants. These all come through from different areas, but there's larger numbers around. And if you look at the number of new open access initiatives, many of them in books at the Radical Open Access, then you find that there's huge numbers of new, innovative, open access publishing, and they've all got different business models. They're all doing different things in different ways. So there's no requirement that we should be looking, in fact, a requirement that we shouldn't be looking for a single business model. We need that diversity of business models, which we don't have presently in the print world, by the by. Okay, so infrastructure support, I'm running close to time. Infrastructure to support bibliodiversity, I think it's in the distribution and in some cases the revenue processes that there's real returns to scale to be made. And therefore it's in those areas that we need to have open and community managed infrastructures to support the huge diversity of publishers on one side and the huge diversity of needs by readers on the other. And that if we take our eye off the ball and allow a single publishing platform to come in, or a distribution platform, we will lose an enormous amount by doing that. So it really is that community ownership, community and diversified control. It's not about scaling an individual publisher or a platform, it's about scaling the ecosystem and supporting an ecosystem, and I come back to that being open protocols, open data models, open software, community control. And so, very quickly, I know of 3 recently funded projects to develop these types of open community-owned infrastructures. Each of them has received funding in the order of £2 to £3 million over 2 to 3 years. And so these are fairly major projects that could make a difference. And also, luckily, they're working together and they'll be working collaboratively to try and support each other. 2 of them we have represented. One is the Operas Network, which is EU funded. The second is COPIM, and also there's a ScholarLed, a group of ScholarLed publishers that are involved with that as well. And the third that I'm just going to quickly mention because they're not here is the Next Generation Library Publishing project, which has received funding through the Arcadia Fund for about $2 million as well. Really concentrating on library publishing networks and supporting library publishing networks. The main players in there are Catherine Skinner, Catherine Mitchell, and Kristen Ratton. If you want contact details, you could either contact Kristen or any of the people on the screen there. But again, that's another really exciting group, and all 3 are going to be working together over the next few years. Okay, Eelco.
Well done. Okay, so as Rupert mentioned, we have a couple of projects that we're going to present here, but it's going to be in an extremely short time. You're not going to hear everything that's important about them. And I'm also going to split mine in 2 because I'm going to talk about DOAB, the Directive of Open Access Books, and Opera, and filling in for Pierre Monnier on the Opera project, and he's the coordinator, and I'm not going to do him justice, unfortunately, but you'll get some of the ideas behind it, hopefully. So, starting off with the Directive of Open Access Books, this is actually an example of one of those dangerous, potentially dangerous infrastructures because it has a gatekeeper role, so it sort of has a role in defining what is an open access monograph. And I want to say straight away, as one of the founders of the Directive Open Access Books, we don't want to have exclusive rights on what is an open access monograph. Our goal was simply to provide a service that would aid discovery of books, of open access books, make books part of the ecosystem, get libraries to recognize open access books as valid types of scholarly output that should appear in catalogs and discovery systems as well. So we created a searchable index of peer-reviewed monographs, and we link back to the open access publication and to the web shops and vendors where you can find the book. It's just metadata, so it's a very small database. So that was what we did. But then, doing that, you need to define, what is this collection about? And we said it should be about research monographs, it should be about peer-reviewed content, And so our second goal was that libraries should be aware of what is this list. And so our goal is to provide what we call an authoritative list of open access book publishers and their books, their open access books. So in a way, we are a player in defining, what open access books are, and that is a very delicate area to tread, and we don't want to monopolize that discussion in any way. So that's just something to start off with. So we were careful with what the requirements were, and in the end there were just two. One is that there must be an open access license to qualify as an open access book. It can be any Creative Commons license, it can even be a proprietary license, but it must be public, it must be clear to the user what it means and what the rights actually are. And so, but obviously most of these books in DOAB are under a Creative Commons license. And we use all the versions, you can find all the versions there. And then, in addition, we have a sentence there about peer review, that academic books shall be subjected to independent and external peer review prior to publication. Now this is a moving target, because actually open peer review and post-publication peer review are things that are very interesting and upcoming, and we want to support that as well. So this is not something that is sort of static, and it will change over time as the community, becomes more aware of open access models. A thing to sort of contemplate is what happened when we started in 2012. So we're now 7 years old, or maybe 8, and the growth has been very consistent, around 50% of new books coming in every year. So, and so you can expect we are going to go through the roof to about 50,000 very shortly. And then it becomes a very significant amount of books that are being published under an open access model. And I think, so there is this one resource which grows quite easily, and that's what we can witness here. But actually most of the publishers have a hard time developing the models to publish these books under open access. But actually there is a lot of them doing it, and the number of books that are becoming open access is growing quite significantly. I'm going to say a couple of things about what's going on with DOAB, and then I'll move on to Opera. How am I doing? Almost done. Yeah, okay. So we started it as an initiative of OAPEN Foundation. I'm director of OAPEN Foundation. We manage DOAB. And then after a while we felt that DOAB deserves its own recognition and needs to have its own governance structure and its own mission. So we found a partner in Open Edition, a French aggregator of open access journals and books, and the coordinator of Opera, that I'll turn to shortly. And so together we developed a new foundation, and we developed a governance structure to share responsibility for DOAB, and we're going to start campaigning for support. An important thing is here that this is something that publishers provide the content. All we do is ask the publishers to fill in, what they actually do, how their program is set up, what they do for peer review, and what their licensing policy is. And once we've done that, they're a listed publisher and they supply the content. So it's a very lightweight structure, and because of that we've been able to maintain this resource for all these years. But actually, if you want to do some serious work, it deserves some more attention and more money and more support. So that's a message to all of you. We will campaign to find support to carry on with the direct open access books. And it's important to understand that open infrastructures that are community governed, that are community driven, that are not profit, rely on support from the community. And in the end, the community has to come together to decide which open infrastructures they want to support, to make sure that they will exist in the future. So that's just a message that I have for you. So one of the things that I think Rupert also mentioned is this thing about diversity and about establishing trust around open access, and that's why we're going to go a step further in trying to create transparency around open access books, and that is to make visible the type of peer review that went on behind the book, and it will be quite easy in the future. We will be attaching a label, and there will be a pop-up screen where publishers can actually show the peer review process that went into every single book they publish, and that's the service we are developing. We developed the technical setup within NEOS, and we will be introducing in the coming years. So, lastly, what we'll be doing next year is we'll be redeveloping DOAB as an open source platform, and that's thanks to the Opera P project, and I'll turn to Opera right now, skipping this. So, Opera is a European initiative. It's an effort to create what we call a distributed research infrastructure for open scholarly communication in the social sciences and humanities. So it's directed to social sciences and humanities. It's a long-term project which will carry on many years, and it's to help the social sciences and humanities transition to open access and open science. That's the rationale behind it. It involves many different projects and efforts that I can't talk about now, but the long-term aim is to become an established research infrastructure as it is understood by European countries supporting research. And then that means that there is a substantial scale and substantial funding to support that. So that's our long-term goal, and we're trying to achieve that. I come back to a remark made by Rupert about the long tail of scholarly communication, particularly in the social sciences and humanities. There is a real diversity. Publishing is done in smaller scale. There is less dominance in this area of publishing. It means that many of the players are small, and they are often underfunded. They are often not aware of newest technology. There is a lack of information in the market, and there is very little coordination. Another word for this diversity is obviously also that it is a fragmented landscape, and that it doesn't have the scale to transition, and that it doesn't have the scale to achieve funding this fragmented landscape is our theme, and what we want to do within Opera is to create a form of collaboration and cooperation between the field in a distributed manner to do something about. So I'll just read this: a federated open access, open scholarly communication catalogue of services for humanities and social sciences researchers in Europe. So it's Europe-centered, it's Europe-funded, unfortunately, but it's a sort of a coordinative effort. Engaging researchers and publishers in a sustainable open scholarly communication model, streamline the scholarly communication landscape with targeted services, developing innovation, multidisciplinarity and multilingualism, so it is supporting diversity while not, let's say, having to fall into the trap of fragmentation. And it's also a special effort to renew the engagement of society with humanities and social sciences, because we feel that needs strengthening, and we need to sort of rely on social sciences and humanities to have an impact on society and do some additional work to achieve. It will operate in first instance 5 services that we call central services, but every member, there are by now about 40 members in 20 different countries, they have their own role and input in providing services to the whole community, and we hope to grow significantly in Europe. But we start with a few central services, and I'll just show them here. One is what we call a common access point, which is actually going to be a catalogue of services of all the members, all the players in Europe. There is a discovery platform. There is a certification platform which is provided by DOAB. There is a metric service which was developed in Hermios and provided also by open book publishers. And then there is this Research for Society platform. So those are 5 things we want to add to the landscape. And discovery is an ongoing project. Certification and metrics are going to be introduced in 2020 as a sort of pilot service. Research for Society still has to find funding. So those are the central services for within the Opera consortium right now. I'm going to skip a few. So here is the discovery platform, the certification platform, metrics, just to make you aware of the efforts that are going on there. And then I'm ending with this one point that all these services are based on open principles. So they are open and freely available to users. They are open source and available for reuse by others. And the data shared is under open licenses. So that's what I'd like to end with. So now over to Eileen.
Okay, great. I'm Eileen, and I'm the director of Punctum Books, and which is one of the presses in ScholarLed, which is a consortium of 5 presses in the US and the UK and Europe. Mattering Press, Open Book Publishers, Open Humanities Press, Open Book Publishers, and Punctum Books. Oh, and I said something twice, and Mason Press. We are the ones who put together this big grant bid to work on infrastructure. And so what I want to do in my 10 minutes is say some things about infrastructure, which seems to be what everyone wants to talk about right now, but we haven't spent enough time, in my opinion, theorizing it and talking about what it actually means. And then I'm going to share some details about our grant and the work that's going to be involved in that grant. And I'd also like to invite everyone in this room to please let us know if you want to be involved in any way in this work. I actually can already see 6 to 7 people sitting here who are on a list on my desk back home, who I'm going to be emailing to ask, do you want to help us work on this grant? So first of all, at Punctum Books, oh, and the final thing, sorry, Joe DeVille is the co-author of what I'm getting ready to share with you. He's one of the directors of Mattering Press. At Punctum Books and also at Mattering, and I think for everyone in ScholarLed, open to read, open to scrape, and or open to download is a really weak definition of open access. But it is the one that most of us have been living with for a long time. And it's only been in the last couple of years that people have become incredibly invested in thinking about infrastructure. I think we can probably all agree that the last couple of years we're hearing all these different voices and groups start to raise the issue of infrastructure and to ask ourselves, what are we going to do about the infrastructure? Because it can't just be we make books that are open to read, scrape, and download. We have to pay attention to the infrastructure, or half of the efforts underway right now will be defunct, 10 years from now. We already have a graveyard of the digital humanities, and I don't want to go there. Okay, so, that's important to keep in mind. Open has got to be about open infrastructures. It's got to be about openness along all points of the publication process, right? Now, a quote that I have on my desk, and that we actually included in our grant proposal, and that everybody puts in their grant proposals these days, and so we're probably all tired of hearing it, but in Jeffrey Bilder, Jennifer Lynn, and Cameron Nalon, they said, everything we have gained by opening content and data will be under threat if we allow the enclosure of scholarly infrastructures. This, for me, is a mantra now. It's something to work towards, okay? But hang on. What do we mean when we say infrastructure? What is it, okay? Are we going to go with the basic dictionary definition, the basic physical and organizational structures and facilities needed for the operation of a society or enterprise, things like buildings, roads, power supplies, etc.? No, that's not good enough. Luckily, Joe works in science and technology studies, where it turns out there is a huge field devoted to infrastructure studies. We should start reading in that field. It's important. People have been thinking about this for a long time, and they have things to teach us before we run off and start chasing after, our new infrastructures. the definition should address more than basic physical and organizational structures. It does include the material, but it should also include the semiotic, the meanings we collectively assign to our infrastructures. It should include political orderings and moral reasonings. Infrastructures, in other words, are not neutral, but rather have the potential to either support or challenge dominant understandings of how things ought to be done. So Joe decided that we should have about 3 ways in which we might want to start rethinking what we think infrastructure means. We may want to shift from a focus on infrastructure alone to broader processes of infrastructuring as a verb. This means attending not just to what is being built, but also to what relations are being put into play. And following from this, infrastructures are always situated in particular communities in relation to particular historically specific moral, political, and economic logics. Infrastructuring is always provisional. Despite the tendency for infrastructures to come to be seen as unchanging and unchangeable, they are constantly being remade by the various individuals and organizations involved in the various relations that are in play. The building, the reinforcing, and in some cases the challenging of infrastructures is always an ongoing process. Indeed, in the world of scholarly communications, it is the hope that infrastructures are provisional that actually animates the open access movement. I mean, think about that for a minute. It's such an obvious point, and yet it doesn't get stated enough, okay? At the same time, we are constantly confronting the continued resilience of commercial closed access infrastructure. And everyone in this room knows we're in our transition period right now, a messy, chaotic, and yet in my opinion, very hopeful period. So, to that end, the presses and ScholarLed got together in a room in Amsterdam in February of 2018. I had a terrible cold and spent most of my time sneezing and coughing, but when we got together and decided to form the group ScholarLed, I got an invitation from Joe at Mattering Press. Would I be interested in a project with other presses to figure out different ways to fund open access books that wouldn't include charging authors fees? And I'm like, sign me up. Yeah. But I have they had enough money with a grant from the Open Air Foundation to bring a couple people from each press. And I said, I'd like to bring a librarian. And that was the beginning, the germ and the seed that led to COPIM. Because Sherry Barnes, who's in the room, who's the scholarly communications expert at UC Santa Barbara Library, was in that room with us. She actually coined the name of our group. And she helped us to realize that whatever we were going to do, and whatever we were going to build, and whatever we were going to develop should be done hand in hand with librarians. From the beginning. Not to go to them at the end and say, we built this thing, do you like it, give us money. So that led to the grant to Research England and the Arcadia Fund. And I was shocked when we actually got it. I mean, my first reaction was not happiness, it was dread. Because it's so big and it covers so many different things. So in my last couple of minutes, I'm just going to share with you what we're going to be working on. And one of the things I'm also really proud of that Rupert touched upon at the end of his talk is that when we got this grant, we looked around and noticed a lot of other people were getting similar grants, also for infrastructure. Are we going to do this by ourselves, in competition with each other? Because that's how it usually works in my discipline, the humanities. People get grants and those things become narcissistic, ego-driven, property control. And I don't want any part of that. I've lived in that world and I'm over it. So one of the first things we said is, let's call up these other people who are also getting grants and let's collaborate. Let's share our wisdom and our expertise, non-competitively. So we have 6 projects in our grant that I'm just going to chase through really quickly. The first is a revenue infrastructures project, which is being led by myself and Joe DeVille, who's based at Lancaster University. We want to spend the next 3 years with librarians working on new community-led, fully open consortial funding models that will help enable libraries to better support open access book publishers. We want to build on moves in this direction that have already been established by players such as the Open Library of Humanities, led by Martin Eve and Caroline Edwards, and also open book publishers. This is a kind of inspiration for this. We see this funding model, which would be consortial and with libraries, as pretty vital to the future success of OA book publishing, and to move to a situation in which access to library funding streams does not have to be contingent on the size of the publisher. That's important, right? The second work project is knowledge exchange and piloting alternative business models. This is being led by Martin Eve at Birkbeck University. He'll be working with the team to explore ways to strengthen the channels of communication between the diverse stakeholders that make up or could make up the landscape of open access publishing. This includes, most importantly, helping established publishers transition to open access publishing models, as well as providing easy-to-use resources to help other publishers think of doing so in the future. So there's that. Then we have a community governance model, a community governance project which is being led by Sherry Barnes, who's here in this room, and Yannicka Adima at the Center for Post-Digital Cultures in Coventry. If infrastructures are inevitably political, then in our view, it has to be the scholarly community broadly defined that decides what this is going to look like. We need to have community governance for what we hope is going to be the bibliodiverse landscape we want to help build, with lots of players, not just 5 main players, all of whom could be better supported, not just to survive, but to thrive and even innovate in the landscape. Then we have building an open dissemination system led by Rupert and open book publishers, working on a kind of mass open shared catalog with all sorts of open data, etc., that will help open books be better integrated into institutional libraries and enhance discovery and dissemination. We also have a work project on experimental publishing, reuse, and impact being led by Yannicka Adima at Coventry, which is looking at, how can we redefine what an academic book even is? How can we make that definition more capacious, more generous, and more focused on remixing, experimenting, and redefining what a book is, while also saying the book is not going anywhere, but it has many forms, and they all need to be supported. Finally, we have a work project devoted to archiving and digital preservation, led by Rupert. Rupert, you're working too much. Who else is in there with you? And Gareth at Loughborough University Library. Gareth Cole is also working on that one, right? I hope I haven't left anybody out. And final thought. What kind of infrastructural relations do we want to put into play? We want them to be collaborative, we want them to be activist, and we want to support scaling small. And that's that. Thank you.